And now we're going to shift gears a little bit and actually go through all these reports that we kind of held back on them because they weren't all that exciting just to look at the baseline. It's when we start looking at the comparisons between these alternatives that some of these reports start making sense. And so now is the time we come back here and we start looking at what we have in these reports, given these four alternatives. And so we always have this cost optimization curve and up here, and it's kind of I'm just going to show it to you. It's kind of a interesting report. We had thought at one time that it would be interesting to try to show that curve, but what you find from looking at real buildings is different than looking at kind of that theoretical curve. And so it just kind of plots these things with the investment. So you got annual cost here and by percent energy reduction, and you can see these things snake all over the place in real things. And this is pretty much that package selection, a simplified view of that package selection report that you see. Debug report is for us if we ever see problems. We can go in here, and this shows model results, but we're going to go and look at these other ones. I'm going to start here with this energy intensity by end use, and I'm kind of going by what you can learn from them. So the energy intensity by end use allows you to go into every building and then try to get these in whatever units that you like looking at. I'm going to change them to kBTUs to have them common all the way across. My kBTU meter is better than my per foot squared is better than my kilowatt hour or watt per foot squared meter. My metrics are I know these better. So we can see right here that the annual EUI, we just saw those in the site summary. So we see a summary of what we have here. But let's look at our base case. And what's interesting in this is that we can roll this up and we can look at the breakdown by all the buildings in that alternative by their energy types. And so you can look at this in the entire site, and site means the energy that's at the boundaries of our study area, not back to the source. In this case, that's what the site is, but it does tell us that it's the roll-up results of all the buildings in that. So we see some things that are fairly typical. We see cooling energy in the summer. We see heating energy in the winter. But if we look at our bars in this case, remember I'm looking at the base case here. We see that we get our lights and our interior equipment, and if you look at that is in many cases for many months that is the majority of the energy, and even in the summer months when we're air conditioning, that is over half the energy, or about half. You can then get into all the details on each of these. You can get into the gas. That was the electricity. Here's the gas. So this heating that we saw here was the electric portion of that heating. This is where the majority of the heating takes place, is right here. But here's the total resource breakdown, and we can see that a large chunk of that is heating. And don't believe that number. I don't know why that number is sitting at. I'm just looking at the pie size at this point. Let's go back to the details. So that gives you kind of a picture of the entire study, but you can go into any building and do the same thing. You can go into the electricity, the gas, and I look at the details a fair amount. So if I want to compare one building, or if I know where if I want to go into a building in my base case and I want to see where is all the energy being consumed, and where would I, by looking at where the energy is consumed, where would you have opportunities for reduction? And so we see we've got in this this DFAC, we've got interior lights, equipment, fans, interior equipment, heating, and systems. Now we do have gas equipment in this DFAC, and we see it by month. And then over here to the far right is the annual, so we can see how this adds up to the total for that. So we can see the electricity portion, and then we can see the gas portion. So here's the 107 made up, broken out this way. The total is the line down here, so we see that a lot of it is in that 51% of the electricity is in the interior equipment, and here of course the majority of it is in the heating, even though there's a fair chunk in the interior equipment here. So it's really good when you want to start looking at, what can I go after, what do I need to go after, and of course you can always look at the as we knew that the interior equipment is the majority of that on the electric side, and the same thing on the heating on this. So this is the number side. Here's the the graph side of that. So it's good here to look at this because even with the differences in square footage, it's a way to get a feel for the numbers. So a lot of times, this one has 630,000 square feet, and so if I looked at just the electric energy for this, which we can look at that, and it would break it down in the same fashion if I do energy by end use. And if I know the totals and they all make sense, then looking at it, the energy by end use may make the numbers may make sense to you or not. Okay, and in many cases, for me, like I said, because you got varying building sizes, that it's hard to know why, if this number has meaning or not. If you need to look at the totals and you're trying to check the totals, and this is why it's here, you definitely want to look at the if you're looking at let's say if you have, and remember this is the total energy for the year. If you want to look at for the totals for the year, then this is a good place to look at the breakdowns of all those different totals. So you can look at those totals monthly. You can look at those by building monthly, by building contribution. You can see some of this in that site summary report as well. But this will give you a little bit by energy group. You can see those breakdowns. So if you want to see the totals of that, but for me, I mainly look at the energy intensity by end use, and in the same thing with the demand. Now in this case, the demand intensity by end use, this is the peak energy that a facility uses, and it kind of sums those up. And so you can see the coincident peaks, and you can look at those by the energy uses as well. But once again, for me, what I think is more important is to look at the total demand. Now this is where you check and see if you've got enough capacity. So if you got substation issues, where in this case let's just pop this to megawatts, and let's just leave that at. Let's kind of put that at the megawatt. This gives you a really good idea of what this. And so if you're looking at, in this case, let's just say, for example, for this area, you had 25 megawatt maximum as your available power, and after that, you'd have to invest in your electric infrastructure to give you more. And you can see right here, if you built those extra buildings, that you would exceed the capacity. And remember, this is a coincident peak, meaning this is the peaks, the sum of the peak of the peaks. In other words, that's what the meter would see. Even though each building can peak at a little different time, that's a coincident peak versus a non-coincident peak. And then the non-coincident peak could be higher, but the meter doesn't. Your electric equipment only has to supply at that given time, even though the building. The barracks may not have the peak in the middle of the day because everybody's gone, while the DFAC does peak in the middle of the day, right? But the barracks peak may be in the evening. The building's really warm, and then all the people come back and they all take showers, and you can see that peak could hit all in the evening, but it may not be the peak. that study area is seeing. So we can see that right here. And in this case, if we built the buildings better, we actually reduce our peak. We reduce it from this 22 megawatts down to 18 megawatts, and that can be a big deal in making decisions if you can build more structures, if your infrastructure will allow it. And we can see the same thing with the gas. Gas, a lot of times we don't necessarily have that, but sometimes piping issues, and if you might have to add another branch to get more gas there, then you might need to change this to a different unit. That's fine, but the point, you get the general idea that. So for me, energy intensity by end use and this demand by end use are kind of the ones that we use there. This load duration curve, it can be really powerful, looking at how much time you spend at different, and I'll give you an example of that in a minute. So we'll look at that base case again, and I like to look at the site, and I have a lot of patience for this step right here, because right now it's downloading for each of those facility groups. It's downloading 8,760 hours of heating, cooling, electric energy, taking all those from all those different buildings, summing all those up coincidentally, and then sorting it from the highest to the lowest. And so if I look at this base case, let me show you what I see when I see this curve. All right, so we see this peak, and I forget what units we selected, kilowatts. Let's just put it back to this megawatt thing that we saw a minute ago. So our base case is sitting it's sitting at this peak. This is just heating demand. We were looking at not the hot water demand. So this is just the heating demand. And this is what I see when I see this. What I see, remember, this is our base case, and we'll check the shape of this in a minute in our better and best case, or at least in our best case. What I see is what I see is a lot of peak capacity here. So you see that you got this, what I call a needle peak right here. So in other words, I'm buying equipment to meet this peak here, but I'm not using it very much. So if I was, ideally, the best thing would be is where I'd run the equipment, where I could run it constantly for longer amount of hours. And so this is from 1 to 8,760 hours, right? You see the 8,000, so it goes 8,760 hours in a year. And what I'm seeing is I'm not getting very good utilization from this equipment. So I'm seeing that it's just not used all that much. Now let's look at our cooling demand. And once again, so I'm buying a lot of capacity. I've got to put a lot of equipment, yet I'm not using it. So here I'm only using some of that capacity only for 4,000 hours for less than half the year, and I expect that, right? There's some seasonality there, but it's not loaded. Let me give you an example. I'll just show you the electricity. See how we're using a lot more of it in bigger blocks, right? So this is a better utilization. At least I'm using more of it. And I can look at the combined heating and cooling together. Once again, I'm buying a lot of peak capacity. In other words, I'm buying a lot of equipment size, and I'm not running it all that much. And for heating and cooling equipment, the key is to try to get as many full load hours as you can out of it. But just keep those shapes in mind, and let's just see what happens when we go to the best case. And in this, what we're looking at is we're trying to get our peaks lower by doing more to the building, right? And that way we can then get the size smaller, and then hopefully use it more. And yep, there it goes. So we see that the peak came down, and it's still not it's not the best. We always have some days and stuff that are high up here. And this is where you can decide as a designer, but we're looking at planning. But as a designer, if you saw this type of information, you might want to buy, let's say the equipment at this size instead of this size, knowing you'd only have, looks like an hour or two of discomfort. And that's kind of a design decision that you can make. Let's see the cooling demand. It's a little blockier. We've made the building better. so it doesn't run as many hours. It's running a little bit thicker. We don't have to buy as much. We're buying 27 and versus 41, and the other was 76 and 50. So we're buying less of that equipment at the this is 53 versus 76. We're buying less capacity and still running it. We're not seeing a huge nice large fractions of full load hours there. But this gives you an idea of what it looks like, what your demand looks like, and then you can compare it between the different cases. This case we see 11 versus 7, and like I said, we have to look. That's megawatts, and remember this is for a fraction of the load. It's not. This isn't the entire load. This electricity demand does not have the cooling in it. So we have cooling demand separate from electricity. And if you remember before, that a lot of that cooling was the electric load went to the cooling. So we're seeing a different slice of that data. Anyway, that's just for some of us, that gives us an idea of what we're looking at going forward. We've seen the site summary report. I'm going to come back to these package summaries here in a minute. We see that site summary report here, and we've looked at this multitude of times. It's kind of our go-to report, where we kind of go here first, and then we have and so we've got our investment costs and our number of facilities, and so we've looked at that quite a bit. So we're familiar with this one. The source summary looks as the same columns and information as the site summary, except at this point it's multiplied by those fuel factors, which give us an idea of how much energy it would take back at the power plant if it was electricity. How much fuel is consumed at the power plant. And so what we see here for kBTUs, instead of that 120 down to 61, we're seeing, this is for the total, we're seeing 246 down to 131. It gives a different view of the energy when we look at it all the way back to the power plant. And if you remember, those factors were in the utility rates, where we're looking at about 3.34 on our electricity. We take 3.34 units of fuel to make the 1 unit of energy that we receive at the site, and it's I believe it's like 1.05 for natural gas. So there's about a 5% loss of energy in the there's a parasitic on the natural gas as it's transported from its source to where we use it on site. Okay, I'm going to do this phasing at the end, and I'm going to look at the package parameter summary and the package parameters. Now these are downloads, Excel downloads. Right now it's loading that data. We'll let that load for a second here. Okay, and then when we have that available, we hit the download. We'll go ahead and put that on our desktop, and that was the package parameter summary. Package. We save that. We see that that's right here. And what we get here is, get that a little bit bigger. We see that if we look in the first column A, we see all the inputs that we have, and this is for our demolished building, and we see that for each of the facility group types. So we start with, this was our warehouse mid-century, then we went to our pre-1980 warehouse that we're going to demolish. And so we see all the parameters that were set for those two groups of warehouses that were going to be demolished. And it was in the, of course it was the baseline, because that is what's selected. When we go to the base case, what we have is, and we look at all the alternatives. We don't look at the baseline, because the baseline is basically one of the is that set right here. So we have, once again, all the facility groups are here. For this, we see all the, and we see in this case the base case is selecting the baseline. So what your package selection is, what you're going to see selected here, and you can see all the inputs for each of those. And it does this by alternative. And if we go to the better case, what we'll see is that, you know, you can go through and see which package was selected, and then the inputs that were selected given that package. So if nothing else, it gives you a it lets you know what all those information was in one location. And see, we went from that, which was the HVAC here, we went to the HVAC here, and so you can see that. And in the best case, it selected. What I look at is I follow a parameter through a facility group, and I see it was like 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, and it went to 1.3, 1.3, and then it was selected there, and you see the envelope in that first row column. Column 6 was was set at 1.3. So that's what I'm looking at when I kind of look at this. So this gives the data in one slice. You get another slice of that with the package parameters. We're going to download that as well. All right. It's the same parameters, but they're organized differently. In the other one, you notice it had the alternatives there, and in here you have this kind of crosses those. So you see the brigade headquarters here, pre-1980. In this one is the baseline or base case was here, and then when it went to the better case, this was the selection, and it went to the best case, and this was the selection. So what you don't see is the different. The other one you saw each of the packages in those parameters are lined up. This just tells you kind of what the endpoints are for each of those alternatives. It doesn't kind of show you the progression or how it was built. It just kind of goes, okay, here's the alternatives, here's the baseline, base case, better and best, and it just goes through it like that by facility group. So it's just a different organization of the same data, but since it's so much and you get to see it in varied ways, it helps to look at it differently. So one allows you to go through and look at all the changes per all the different packages, and this kind of just shows you what was selected. And if you have a good idea of what was in all those packages, then this it helps. So this helps you get the information out and get it out for reports. You can pull the R values out for the insulation, the type of window glass. You can see some of that, what the interior types are, what the wall types are. So there's the wall base continuous insulation for this facility group, and you can look at that however you like in all these package parameters. So it's not picking out, let's say, your favorite parameter, but it is picking it all out, so you have a basis to go look at what's important to you. All right, that's those two reports, and those are kind of more outputs. And remember, for several of these reports, we do have the Excel download, so you can download that report, and we see that as well for this, the site and source summaries. Those download reports here, and then the last one we have here, and this is an important one here, is the study phasing. And so to review that, let's go back here really quick. Let's go all the way back to the map, to the master facility list, and let's just quickly look at what we're doing here again. So in here, we're looking at what we're looking at here that's important to us is we can see the map coming up over here, but what we're looking at are these dates here, this construction date and what it means by each group again. So for this existing pre-1980 building, this year right here is the year that we plan to do that retrofit, be it that ESCO retrofit or that deep energy retrofit, whichever, by alternative. But we're looking, this building is scheduled to go in, in 2018, just in a couple years. When we come down here to this plan building, these buildings here are to be constructed in this time frames. And so once again, if we say, well, what the heck was that again, we can always hit that, go in, zoom in like that, and see we're looking for building 42. It should be right in the center of our screen, and there it is. So if we're not sure what it is, we go, oh yeah, it's that building right there. We can visually ungroup that to take a peek at that again, and we're going, oh yeah, that's it. We're adding right here. That's a planned building that goes right there. So these dates here become really important, and this is a type of thing where you can put the date in however you know it. If all you know is kind of a medium term, long term, short term, and you can pick dates and say, okay, I want to have it all done by the end of this date. You put those dates in there. And if you have more information, so as you come back and you had, let's say you had your 2030 plan, and some of the buildings were put in at 2025, some were put in, didn't make it and slipped to 2031, you can actually put those in and you can update this, and then you can relook at that data when you go back out. Point is that this construction date is when we're planning on touching that building, and then we're going to see how that comes out in the phasing report. So once again, the demolish, we're going to demolish these in 2025, and these are going to be, all these warehouses are going down by 2020. Well, there's some in 2020 here. So like I said, you put these in, and if we're planning on having that whole chunk demolished by 2025, that's what we put in there, and then that's what will show up in that phasing report. So let's see how that plays out now when we go look at that. We go look at that phasing report. So we go to facility loads, back to results, and we look at that. We look at that study, phasing energy, and let's put that 2025 date in. We just saw. Let's not put in 2025. Let's put in that 2018 date. I want to see some of that stuff where it's we can title it however we want. Obviously, we can make it short-term, long-term, however we want. But we'll get a feel for this. We'll put a couple dates in here. The nice part is that we can put in any amount of dates that we want. We can generate the report every year. We can generate it however we want. What we see is kind of the rolled up results here. So we see baseline, base case, better case. We see all those rolled up results, and so if we want to know what the impact is in 2018, we can then take that and we can compare it. So, but what we're looking at in our, let's just go to base case first. And in this case, what's nice is I can take this data and I can sort it however I like. But if we look at the buildings that are sitting here, these planned buildings, 2020, right here, you see they won't be built, so they're not going to be in here. I go down here, I see that for all my planned buildings. If I see my demolished buildings and the dates on these are not yet demolished, then they'll still be persisting in this report. And if I go down here and look through, I'm checking there's a couple ways you can do this. What I like is to do a custom sort and sort it by that construction date, and then you can just kind of follow along. So here everything we said 2018. So if you notice the 2018 existing and planned, so these two buildings were built, right? And these two buildings should should have been retrofitted at this point. Now, you see here we have no building investment because it's the base case, right? But let's look at that best case and do the same thing. Let's take that and let's look at the sort, custom sort. Let's do it by construction date. And we go back there, and here we see the investment here to pick those up. Now, this investment is that delta investment. Once again, it's that delta investment over and above. So in this building here, for this retrofit, we spent $670,000. And this is by building now, not by facility group. This is by building. Every building in here with building number. And in this case, for this planned, we looked at looks like 1.6 million in additional investment for Barrick M versus Barrick N. So we see how that plays out here. We can go through the cases. We walk through that, but let's go ahead and just minimize that quickly, and let's look at the a date a little bit out in the future. Let's look at that 2030 date. I think once you see a couple of these, you'll get an idea of what it's doing, and you can, like I said, we have it where you can put it in as many as you want. You can have it as refined or as granular as you want. Like I said, if all you know is 2 dates, great, put 2 dates in there for all your buildings. But this gives you the flexibility this way to generate it however you want. Once again, and when you look at this site summary, you'll depending on what's been done, what's been demolished, what's been built, and what's been retrofitted, all these numbers here will change accordingly. And along with their investments here, you see the investments over here and the annualized cost. So this is kind of gives you the, at this point in time, boom, here you are. This is what's been built. This is what's been retrofitted. This is what's been demolished. Here's our snapshot for each of those alternatives as you go through time. So think of it's just a timeline going through all this stuff. By the end of the study period, right, when you get to that end, it'll be kind of what that site summary report showed you, right? That's the end point. But this gives you kind of the time step all the way through those, and you get to pick the times, you get to pick the dates when all that's executed. But once again, let's just look at that best case again, just to give you once again an idea. We'll go ahead. I'll just go ahead and sort it by construction date. Boom, there it is. So here's all the 2018 execution, here's all the 2020 execution, the 2022, 24, 25, and this was all demolished, so this all came out, as we can see that with the zeros here, and all this was executed all the way up to 2030 to here. We see the 2031 plans not built. So we can see all of this was executed. Here's the investment to date. So let's just see what we have there for that. So to date, out of that, what did we say for the best case? We said it was 88 million. Looks like we've got about 63 million of it spent in this case. I'm looking at the sum here just to get a quick idea. So you can see how much conditioned area was done, what the change in all those costs, and then you can compare that by alternative. And so you can take those and you can use these for planning. You can also put the dates and keep this up to date to what has been done at this study. So if money slipped or if timing slipped, you can always go back in, re-update this, redo the phasing reports and or the timeline reports of all this and say, okay, this is where we're at projected for all those. So that's kind of the idea, and you can just keep running these at whatever times you want until eventually you get to the end. Even if let's say you put in 2060, I mean it's going to, at some point when everything is executed and done, even though it'll kind of keep running, it's just going to keep spitting out the same one, saying, yep, it's all done, executed everything. So it's like I said, it's interesting. So in other words, if things did actually slip and something didn't happen, you changed it, and it happened even outside that study time, it would still pick it up in that phasing report. So that's pretty much kind of an idea of what all these different reports have done. We've added those 4 scenarios, 4 alternatives. I'm sorry, 3 alternatives in our baseline. So we have 4 scenarios in our reports. What the package selection is doing, and kind of the workflow to get to this point. And but like I've said a couple times, it's not necessarily where the time we really want to make our decision on what we're doing. We do want to complete that and go to the installation section, and we want to make sure that we look at that as well when we make our decisions about where we want to invest our money or look at our planning.